Hello there and welcome back to the ClueCon Weekly studio. It's a great day for a ClueCon Weekly, and it's an especially great day because we've got Yufei Tao joining us. Hello, Yufei. How are you doing today?
Hello. Yeah, I'm fine. How are you?
Very well, very well. It's good to have you along. Thank you for taking time to join us today. We're always pleased when members of the community are prepared to take the time and jump in and have a little chat with us. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much for having me here.
Good to have you. I was just saying before we started the recording, I remember you from Kamailio world, and I know that that's the kind of world you operate in, working with Kamailio and Asterisk and other open source software. And I know that you've got a presentation lined up for us about Kamailio and using it in a sort of a high availability way. But before we got to that, I had a few questions for you, Yufei, if you don't mind. And one of the ones that I like to start off with is just a little bit of a background about you, how you got started in the world of communications and telephony and VoIP, or SIP more specifically, and you know, what led you to the position you're in right now?
I was a academic to start with, but jumped boat halfway through. Well, yeah, I had my PhD from University of York in electronics and analog filter design, which is extremely different. And then, after my PhD, I did a postdoc of 4 years in acoustics and binaural 3D sound, some audio signal processing stuff. Yeah. And then after that, I had potentially a position in a academic environment. But when I kind of knew I was going to get it, I suddenly realized it's not something I really liked. Yeah, so
you wanted to leave the academic environment, really?
Yeah, I think many people will like it for the various reasons. You have creative ideas, publications, and going to conferences and stuff. But for me, it's like because I've done two different subjects in the academic world, and then it's like every about 3 years you get to hang into this new field, and then you start to publish some papers, and then going to conferences, and then it's the same. For me, it's getting a little bit boring. So I thought maybe it's not exactly what I wanted. So like people say, when you see the thing, you will know whether that's what you want. And then I realized that was okay. And then I left the university and went to industry. So started my work life in different companies. And then
can I stop and ask you a question there? So when you moved out of the academic world and into industry and you started working in companies, was that in the disciplines that you'd been in, the sort of the acoustic world?
Not really. Every time I change a place, I'll change subject as well. So it's like hopping from to different places all the time. And then when I started my industry life, it was a programmer. And it was the first time I was really doing some software. It was C++, and stuff like that. And in audio codec, mainly. Yeah. And then after 2 years of doing that, I changed job and to Red Embedded. I think it's called Consult Red now. Where they had this vision, that was 2006. They had this vision that SIP, VoIP, is going to be hot. And then they were very early actually starting to basically write our own SIP client stack for a set-top box. So the founders of that company came from set-top box background. So we actually put our software into a little box
Right.
that connects to your TV and stuff. And that's aimed for the patients or elderly who can't be bothered or can't learn computer. So they have something connected to their TV, and then remote control sitting on their coffee table with basically just 2 or 3 buttons in there. One is the green, one is the red, and one is like a menu. You go through the contact list. They probably don't have so many anyway. So that was targeting that. And I was there for 8 years and developing this SIP client software. And also other areas like how do you switch between networks for this? So you have a Ethernet cable, you have Wi-Fi connectivity for this box. And when we have Ethernet, we prioritize. We always jump to the Ethernet. And the one that's not available, we jump to the other one. So how do you make it jump reliably? And then in the end, we discovered it was more reliable than our PC. Yeah, it was a lot of fun doing this kind of quite low level. We have the hardware thing, and then with the JTAG thing, and plug into it, and then put the flash hour program onto that. But the thing is, I think we may have been a little bit misplaced marketing-wise, or some. Yeah, it wasn't very easy to get into that, so it didn't really make a big market.
Right, I see. Yeah. It sounds like you went very, you've been quite deep into these things, programming at device levels and things. So what happened next, Yufei?
Yeah, and then I got that was in West Yorkshire. And then I got the opportunity to move down to the south. And there are more opportunities, obviously. And the weather is nicer, is less cold. Yeah, and then I've been building some VoIP systems to take card payments. So the PCI is kind of
right. Okay. So when you were at the set-top box place, you were working on a SIP client stack. So obviously exposed to the world of real-time communications, as it were. And then your next job was straight into the telephony side, was it?
Actually, I missed a part from the Red Embedded 8 years. I was also doing Kamailio as well. Kamailio was, at first, we were just doing it for testing our clients against. And then we discovered, probably we can offer the service as a package, a client, a box, and a server. So they subscribe to this thing, so they have the service in one go, and then we started to do that. So in that time, it was really, really good, because when you want to do something, you have 2 possibilities. You can tweak the server side, and you can tweak the client side, whichever is easiest. So I was in full control of, because I was the only SIP guy over there. Well, like almost all the places I've been, you're the only SIP guy.
Right. So you built up a familiarity with Kamailio while you were working at the set-top box place, and latterly doing the server side as well. Interesting.
Yeah, so basically the emphasis was on the client side, but later it moved to the server side because the client was pretty much stable, and then we got all the functionalities we wanted, and then we needed to add functionalities on the server side to cope, or to offer. So they provide services. So yeah, and then that's where I learned most of my SIP and Kamailio from.
Okay. And what brought you to where you are right now, which is, I believe, running your own consulting business and delivering these kind of services?
Yeah, and currently, well, I haven't been seriously taking many customers. I just still focus on one of my major ones, and then doing full time.
Right.
But I do some small projects. Yeah, because I run out of time if I do too much. Yeah. Yeah.
Great.
So the consulting side is not like it's still the early days. It's not like proper. I live completely on the consulting side.
Right. And so you're working in a company and continuing to do Kamailio kind of stuff with them.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Right. I'm with you. Okay. Well, that's great. Thank you for giving us that background. That's amazing because, of course, the two disciplines are kind of related. As you mentioned, you worked on codecs, and there's a lot of intrinsic excitement in the world of the different codecs that are out there. But of course, codecs don't actually come into the picture at all with Kamailio. But I believe your presentation also mentions RTPEngine, so there is some RTP stuff to that as well. And it's in the area of implementing a high availability system, I believe, or something along those lines.
Yeah, because the background I have been from put a lot of emphasis on high availability. The requirement is the code should never drop. And so that, yeah. So when we were, before the days of RTPEngine, we could only do signaling doesn't drop. So we can do Kamailio failover, high availability. And nowadays we have rapid development for the RTPEngine. So we have some tools really good for media high availability as well. So that's really good compared to some years ago where we didn't have this.
Good. So before we get to the presentation, Kamailio can be a reasonably complex thing to deal with, and it's a bit frightening for new people that are getting to use it. And of course, you've been through that learning curve some time ago. I wonder if you could give people, from your experience, just a few hints and tips if they're coming to this. Maybe they already know FreeSwitch or they already know Asterisk, so they're familiar with the kind of media server, as it were, but maybe they're starting to get a bit more serious about SIP itself. And coming to Kamailio, what would you say the top 3 or 4 things are to try and get into your mind in order to come to a working understanding of Kamailio?
I think because Kamailio is very powerful, low level, so you can control almost everything. And then because SIP routing, especially for proxy like Kamailio, the key things is to basically just to get the SIP messages right, parse it and process it according to what the headers are. So the very basic thing is the SIP. So you need to understand SIP pretty well. As I wrote in my recent blog in my company website, blog site, is hard to read the RFC, SIP RFC. So the best way to start is probably have a play with Kamailio. It's very easy to install, and then you can have example configuration files that does the most common routing requirements.
Right, so there's some basic defaults that are already in the sample configurations.
Yeah. If you ever use something in production, you probably won't just use the default one because you want to add your own security checks and whatever things to make it more secure or work according to your own customized requirements. But the example ones are really good starting point for you to start playing. And then you can see what is actually doing in there. And then you can do some TCP dump and some grab captures against some SIP phones or whatever. And you can see how the messages flow from one place to another, and then how the headers have been changed on the way.
Right.
So start playing, get your hands dirty is the key.
Yeah, and in your experience from talking to people, is there any particular area that a new person tends to suffer with until, eventually the penny drops and they think, oh, I understand now? Or is it really just a case of familiarity with the whole of it?
Yeah, I think for me, the knowledge of SIP and the Kamailio came together because I was developing the client code and then developing the server almost at the same time. But I think by playing with the client and server together for everybody else, not everybody can want to write a SIP client for one thing. By playing with them together, it will definitely give you a good starting point. And the huge number of modules may look scary, but they are there to help you, not to, make you have to use that in order to do,
Right.
like a dialogue module. Well, I've seen quite a few people who tend to think that if you want to handle a dialogue, established calls and stuff, you have to use the dialogue module. Actually, no, they're not. They provide you a lot of facilities. But if you are only handling really simple scenarios, they may be overkill. And then you might want to save the pieces of information you really need into hash table, in-memory table. And then you can use DMQ to replicate across so that to achieve HA as well.
Okay, yeah. All right, that's great. Last question before we get to your slide presentation, Yufei, and that is, what is your favorite tool for actually looking at the SIP? So you're configuring Kamailio, but when you want to look at what's happening, what do you tend to like to use?
When you test SIP calls, SNGrep is really good. Fred told me about this. I didn't use that before until he told me, and then I can't stop ever since. Right. I think it's really good to talk to those people at Kamailio World and those really great conferences, and then you learn a lot of things, and then in the end save you loads of time.
Yeah, great stuff. A little bit of SNGrep -C is a very, very useful thing for picking up stuff coming into
yeah, and I've got all my colleagues who look at those into this, and then they can't get out either. It's really good.
Great. Okay, well, thank you for sharing this information with us, Yufei, about your history and your background. What I'm going to do is pop the slideshow up now, and so you're able to start presenting that. And I'm going to pop you in the bottom corner, so people will still be able to see you. You'll be in the bottom right. So here we are.
Yeah. How much time do we have here?
As much as you need, Yufei. Carry on.
Okay. Right, slideshow. Okay, so as I introduced myself earlier, so these ones we can skip through quickly. So basically, my undergrad degree was from Beijing University of Aeronautics and Astronautics. Quite a mouthful. I think President Trump has made an advertisement for us in this. After that, a lot of people start to know this name, but we're all spies, something like that. Yeah. And then I got my PhD from University of York and a postdoc as well, and from audio acoustics side of research and stuff. And then I've got a bunch of publications in the top journals and conferences like academics usually do. Right. And then I moved into industry, and then software engineer, VoIP engineer, and I hold 2 patents in telephony signal processing. So it's basically very simple algorithms that nobody ever thought of, but it happened to work. So it's quite widely used, covered. And then I created my own consulting company, Tao Communications, in last year. Right. And then I've my experiences with SIP. I've implemented some zip stack on the client side, and implemented a bunch of RCs. And then I also have some fun with the VoIP servers, mainly Kamailio and more recently RTPEngine. And you can do some conventional stuff using these servers. And then you can also do some unusual hacks, like the things I presented in Kamailio World 2019. So basically, I hacked the proxies into behaving like a B2B. Diverting the calls around, which was a lot of fun. But it was pretty much a hack. All right. And then this high availability for Kamailio and RTPEngine attracted quite a lot of interest when I was presenting this at the Kamailio 2020 celebration online. And,
right, understandably so. Very important topic for people.
Yeah, because most people would think, well, okay, why do you bother? If the call drops, we can make another one. But sometimes for the call center, if you call the customer call in again, it may end up with a different agent, and the experience isn't that good. So where the background I came from was usually they ask you to make the call never drop. So we have implemented a bunch of things to achieve HA for Kamailio and RTPEngine. And everybody knows they are for signaling and for the media. They are basically proxies. They have a lot of use cases. I've been asked for by a couple of people about the SBC setup using Kamailio and RTPEngine. And then I think typically you would have something like that. You have a external interface, network interface, and the internal one. And the Kamailio and RTPEngine, you bundle them up together to behave like a so-called SBC, even though they are not B2B. But if you are only looking for like NAT traversal and relaying across different network interfaces, so to segregate the two network interfaces for security reasons, and do some load balancing or encryption, decryption of the signaling and the RTP, then you are probably fine with this SBC made up of proxies.
Right.
So high availability, basically, we're talking about two things. One is the server itself needs to be reliable. So you have to be, you design the architecture, you design the scripting, programming to be robust. So it doesn't need to fail unnecessarily. And then sometimes you have network outages, the host or whatever could trigger the failure of your application server. Then in that case, you could set up failover architecture to avoid these things from adversely affect your services.
Indeed,
so that's actually two aspects to that. But I'm going to concentrate on the second one. The first one we'll just skip through is like programming discipline.
Yeah.
So you can keep it simple, basically. Don't overcomplicate things and then get yourself confused. Right. And then the failover setup. In this example, in the upper graph, we have pair of nodes, Kamailio nodes A and B. So the master is basically on A node usually. And then the two Kamailio nodes share floating virtual IP. And then they replicate between them using DMQ module. So if you save your information in the hash table, and then the DMQ module will help you replicate the information across to the slave node. So when the failover happens, the virtual IP will move to your node B, and node B knows everything about all the existing calls. And then it takes over the virtual IP and continue with the services.
Yeah, understood.
And then, yeah, and for the failover virtual IPs, we have chosen Keep Alive D. It's a popular choice, and it's very easy to set up as well. You can find loads of examples online. And then this is just an example what it looks like. Basically, you have a few important things. The virtual IP, your VIP on what interface. And then you can have a check script, which is you can define your own check script. For example, you could send option pings to the Kamailio server to check whether it's responding. And then if it doesn't over a certain time, then you think that server is down, and then you flip the virtual IP to the other node.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's a notify script you can define, which is very useful as well. So when the failover happens, the node switches its status from one to another, from master to backup or to failure, whatever. And then you can process, you can define what you want to do when that happens. Okay. So Kamailio routing configuration, it doesn't, the TM transaction module is used very widely, but there is no support for full replication of the transactions. But however, it's not the end of the world. You can handle most of the important failover scenarios anyway. So here we have analyzed a few scenarios where failover could happen.
Right.
After call establishment, so it's during the call, after the first initial handshake, because the call duration could be quite long, so the probability of catching a failover is highest among the others. So in this case, the node A, the master, handles the initial handshake, and then it does a bunch of things. It finds the correct destination based on whatever routing logic you want to follow, and it saves the things into the hash table and stuff, and then it records routes so that future in dialogue requests will come through itself.
Okay.
And then the node B will handle the buy and OK. And even if you don't tweak the usual configuration files, this can be handled already by, so say the failover happens after the call establishment, and then the buy and OK comes into node B. And then if you use loose root, Kamailio will automatically handle this, so you don't feel any difference.
Right.
The failover, if it happens inside a transaction, is a little bit more complex than that. So for example, in this case, the invite hits the node A, and then node A does these things. And then node B happen to have to handle the response and ACK. In this case, could be quite often because it may take a minute or some seconds for the OK to arrive. Yeah. Sorry, did you want to say?
Sorry, yeah, no, I was agreeing. So you were saying that it's a more complicated scenario when the error occurs during a transaction rather than after call establishment. Yeah.
But the OK, because Kamailio will handle the OK automatically using the via headers. So that is not really a problem. And the ACK for the OK is relayed using loose route, like normal in dialogue messages. So that is not much trouble. But people tend to ask what happens if it is TCP. So you have a connection to the old master node A, and now the connection is gone. In my tests, actually, well, Kamailio will have no problem creating a new connection when trying to send the OK back to the caller side. The trouble might come with the remote end, depending on what devices you're talking about. Some of them, like open source software like Asterisk, I test against, and FreeSwitch, they seem to be fine. They can accept this new connection with this OK coming back. Yeah, but so when I tested, it was quite some years ago against big brand. I don't want to name the name now. Big brand. They had problems with realizing the connection is gone. So they just keep using the dead connection. So it doesn't work on them.
Okay.
So for TCP or TLS, it really depends on what your Kamailio is talking to.
Okay.
Yeah, and then there are failover inside the transaction for cancel. For the cancel messages, because, well, there are two ways of handle them. The cancel from the RFC, it looks pretty much like the invite. So whatever you were doing for finding the destination for the initial invite, you could repeat that for the cancel. And or another way is when the invite came on node A, you're processing it, you could save the destination in a hash table or something. And then when the cancel comes over, you just cancel comes over on node B, you can check the hash table to decide where to send it to. So there are some modifications you need to do to the the example Kamailio configurations. You have to tweak a little bit. Otherwise, it doesn't. Node B will say, "Oh, I don't see any transaction associated with this cancel, so I'm dropping it." But in this case, if you want to relay through, you have to do some changes.
Right, to force the issue a little bit.
Yeah, and ACK to the error responses, which is, well, even if you can't find anything associated with it, relay through. Yeah, but the end side effect is it looks a little bit different from the proper hop by hop ACK, because it's got an extra header, because that's relayed from the last hop rather than generated in this hop. So that's a little bit like bending it, but if you really want to make the transaction work, then you can do that. But the last two cases, they were for failed calls, so actually we care less about them. The two cases we talked about earlier, which were most easy for Kamailio to handle, were for the established calls and successful call attempts. That was the most important we need to care about. And then they were easier to handle as well. So that was not too bad.
Right.
And RTPEngine failover. So we can set up HA for RTPEngine so that the media doesn't drop, but it will take a few seconds for the virtual IP to migrate from the old master to the new master. That's all. You hear a slight silence, and then everything keeps going as normal. I use these two links when I was trying to set up the RTPEngine. They are really good references. It didn't take much time for you to, if you follow, have a think what they are doing.
Right.
Yeah, so RTPEngine failover, we have a hot standby RTPEngine. So master on A, slave on B. And then you have Redis databases. You can have them as cluster or something for high availability as well. And then when calls coming into the master node A, it creates events to notify the node B. And node B in real time loads the information into memory. So when node A goes down, node B immediately takes the relaying without having to load from the database.
Right.
Because it keeps doing that all the way. Yeah. Okay, so the summary is even though transaction isn't replicated, we can still achieve reasonable HA using Kamailio and RTPEngine. And yeah, so you have to, there are different ways to setting them up. For example, you can have RTPEngine and Kamailio bind together to pretend to be a so-called SBC, or you can have some Kamailios and some RTPEngine so that they fail over independently of each other. So it depends on what you want to do and choose the best for yourself. And yeah. Yeah, I've skipped some of them quite quickly because you can find these presentations from my website or the Kamailio slide share and YouTube thing as well. So if you're interested, you could look at the slides.
Great. Well, thank you for making those available. I'm just going to pop us back together. So your screen share is now gone and we're back on together. Thank you very much for sharing that. High availability is a very important topic to a number of people. And going back a few years, although people would ask about it, I think the general feeling seemed to be people would ask about it, but they didn't want to pay them. They didn't want to invest in the type of system that would hold up the RTP stream during a phone call where something went wrong. Do you think that's changed a little bit now and more people are interested in holding up the RTP stream than used to be?
Yeah, I think before maybe you have to pay big bucks to those, telco devices, expensive devices to have this capability. But nowadays with the RTPEngine, it's not that difficult to set up this for yourself. But it depends on the the mindset. Some people will not get into something that's not expensive.
And just I have one other question just before we finish off, and that is I'm assuming, but it's no different at all for video because video is RTP traffic the same as audio, right?
Yeah, it's just another media stream. Yeah.
Great. Okay, well, Yufei, thank you so much for coming and sharing with us. We appreciate that, and people can, of course, go back and pause it on the screen with your company details if they want to get hold of that presentation. It's very enlightening, and as you've said, this puts that kind of high availability solution into the hands of more people if they're prepared to do the work to get into that. So thank you very much for coming and spending time with us in the ClueCon Weekly podcast studio. We'll look forward to seeing you at some other event in the future, hopefully a live one like Kamailio World in the future. But for now, thank you so much for joining us.
Next time. Yeah, thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Thank you. All the best. Bye-bye.